The discrimination of people with disabilities is something we all have experienced in our own personal lives. Prior to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or the IDEA, children with disabilities were not given the opportunity of an education.
They would be institutionalized. They didn't have a program. You didn't really go to school if you had Down syndrome or some other disability like that.
When he was born, both the doctors and the hospital told my mother he should be institutionalized, which is what they did in those days. And she, being a nurse, said, no, that's not going to happen.
Students with disabilities are a protected class. They require, they need, they deserve a level of support, both in instruction and in other ways that go beyond the needs of their non-disabled peers.
When it came time for him to go to school, the schools were, by law, supposed to take the children in, but they resisted. They didn't have any special ed classes, but he did learn to read and write.
The IDEA is a federal law that ensures students with disabilities are provided a free, appropriate public education achieved through services catered to their specific needs.
IDEA helps the state work with schools across Arizona to make sure that we do everything we can to deliver special services to students who need them. In Arizona, we serve about 129,000 students through IDEA out of a total school population of about 1.1 million.
The IDEA is important to me because it actually affects my family. I have a sibling that has Down syndrome, so her entire education is formed around the IDEA.
It affects my community because as a sibling of a child with a disability, I am a part of that community of children in special education.
There's a vital role that the federal government plays. It's especially vital for students with disabilities.
Our job is to make sure that the educators have all the information that they need and as many of the resources as we can possibly help them acquire in order to provide the differentiated services to students.
My job is completely 100% driven by IDEA. How I service students, what their services look like, what their paperwork looks like, are they being provided with a free, appropriate public education, and are they being taught in the least restrictive environment.
Both special education and general education students gain important life skills from learning in the same environment. Research has repeatedly proven that this inclusion provides benefits to all students.
People with intellectual disabilities tend to need to have things shortened up a bit and more direct, and I have just naturally seen that gen ed students get that.
For the typically developing students, or what we often refer to as general education students, they develop a lot of important interpersonal skills. They are more patient and more accepting, they're less prejudiced, they're able to appreciate the diversity of human relationships and the skills that we all bring.
I feel that it's very important that if students are fully included in the classroom, they're being fully accepted by their peers and the whole classroom environment.
Lily loved elementary school, and I think a large part of that is because she was properly included. Aides were there to make sure that Lily was getting a little bit of modified curriculum that was relevant to what was going on in the classroom. She felt like she was doing the work that the other kids were doing, and in doing so, she felt part of the class, a part of the experience that school should be.
People with intellectual disabilities are now being included in gen ed classes. It's a fairly new development when you look at the grand scheme of things, and it's not surprising that a lot of people don't know much about how to go about doing it.
My sister is 7 years old, turning 8 in March, and she has Down syndrome. In her old school, they didn't have special education classes, so she was just with everybody else, and she loved it.
We find that they are able to develop stronger communication skills, stronger interpersonal communication skills. We know that they display fewer inappropriate behaviors and they're more often likely to interact with their peers.
Now that she's at a new school that has special education programs, she's not included in general education classes. She's learning more, but she doesn't like school. I would say it's kind of disappointing.
The problem that I am seeing is more with gen ed teachers, and they will be the first ones to admit it. They don't know enough about including effectively a student with intellectual disabilities.
There's always a need for more time, but more time for general education teachers to be more educated and to be able to service their special ed students in their classroom better.
Inclusion in mainstream classrooms for students with special needs is a humanitarian issue. A lack of proper inclusion perpetuates the segregation between typically developing students and students with disabilities and can lead to harmful prejudice.
IDEA is not only a law that provides educational opportunity, it's also a civil rights law.
I think the IDEA has been executed well in the classroom. I also think that there's room for improvement.
Special education is light years ahead. Today, they have so much more available to the children in the public school system.
Services available to students with disabilities have improved exponentially in the last generation. Including children with disabilities in the classroom helps combat stereotypes that may develop from an early age. The more that children with disabilities are included in school, the easier it is for them to be integrated in society as an adults with a disability.